Hello, welcome to the value of everything. We are going to explore an interesting perspective of how we manage our economy or our politics or the whole encompassing thing. So let's say government in a very different perspective than what would normally be perceived. So currently we have a very interesting system which let's just say it's a taxation based system. How do we extract that tax is via corporations. Well, let me retract and let me find one of my favorite things to put on while I'm driving. Okay. So currently, in the majority of Western countries, we have a corporatocracy. Basically, it means that we have the corporations which are providing the political parties with mega dollars for something in return. We can't just suggest that they're just very nice charitable corporations. So there's something getting returned for the favors, maybe certain legislations, can't say the word, and certain laws, things that are being written in books so that their businesses are protected or monopolized. So things are looking fairly rosy for them. And then on the other side, these political parties have to demonstrate that they're sort of a democracy. And every 4 or so years, they will turn to the public and say all this spiel and then try and get the majority vote. Regardless of that fact, a lot of corporations will provide funding for both sides of the parties. Sometimes there's not really too much of a law to provide for both sides of the parties, and therefore they get their way regardless. So the power is unfortunately apportioned not necessarily to the opinion or to the person, but to the dollars, unfortunately, or the coin. That is unfortunately how the money, how the world revolves. So here we go and look at a different perspective. Now, with the recent drama which is happening in the Republican Party with the candidacies coming forward, well, the one obviously that's standing out is Donald Trump. We have somebody who is financially competent. I guess there may be some other politicians which have got business dealings, but they probably got like favors for favors. They've got positions on boards and for certain political favors. But this Donald Trump has achieved a certain level of success. Even though he has been born into a rich family, he has still managed to not only maintain his wealth but build his wealth from that point, which is an achievement for anybody. Even if you was born into a poor family and then you've aspired up to a middle class family, that is definitely an achievement in itself. So now we see we have Donald Trump, who is very used to the corporations, the corporatocracy. He is very used to paying off politicians and providing favors for favors. But he is obviously a very good business owner. He has dealt with things like bankruptcy, and he has turned businesses around. He has used the legal and political system to push his own finances forward and create value in the world. And in some ways he has generated a number of jobs by his own risk taking. He could have chosen not to do anything and really his wealth could have just been gradually dripped off, but instead he has chosen the correct pursuits and found good ways to provide services to the people, and thus has found a return in the wealth. So one of the things that I would like to explore today is imagine, and now this is scary in itself, but is considering now the way that I've sort of explained how a lot of modern democracies or corporatocracies have been put in place. We do have an interesting way to look at things, and I would like to put into motion an idea of imagine if we could run a country like a business. So, I guess where we start with this running a country like a business thing, it's kind of tricky as to how you associate different parts of the puzzle compared to what the system is right now. So, do we say that the people are the share owners of this country PLC? I probably would say so, because you really would like to be beholden to the share owner of the country more so than anything else. So let's just explore that for 1 second. So if we did have all the individuals of that country having a shared ownership of the value of its country, so obviously that country has to be a floated business, and the business would be to produce a value into the world. So that country has to, and obviously it's going to have to be like a multi-product business, because obviously a country doesn't just produce one thing. So this PLC has to come out in the world, and it has to produce profit margins to the shareholders, which will be the people that are owning the business, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so it like you would almost see that there's a lot of similarities already in comparison to how we have the governance system right now. The only major difference is that I guess with current situations, I guess the government does have supreme power. Whereas really when it comes to a corporation, the shareholders do have the supreme power. However, you do get individuals who do own 51%, whatever in those terms. And obviously there's probably some problems along the lines if we did try and run a country like a PLC. And there could probably a lot of issues in terms of like how the international markets would fund it, and it probably could cause there probably could be some kind of scenario where heightened leverage could kick in, and a number of weird little exploitation things could occur as well. But I'm just going to run through the theory of running a country like a business and see if it can give us definitely some ideas or perspectives of how we are governed, and give us an idea of our own selves. Obviously, I'm a bit more of a free market libertarian, so it's I don't really like centralized authority, but it could be kind of interesting if everybody was an assigned owner of the country itself. So I'm a modern man. I like to look at modern things. So let's just say, for example, we use the blockchain as the assignment of the country to every individual of that country. So let's try and create a really good democracy in itself. We give everybody a share which is equal apportioned to the actual to everybody. So when somebody is born, somebody gets a share of the amount of people that exist in that country, and when somebody dies, they lose that share. So it's just one of those things that when you're born into that country and you are definitely documented as a citizen, you are also a shareholder as well of that country. Now, in theory, you sort of are, but it's interesting how we could say, okay, right, well, now we're a shareholder. So, on that platform, we do have a bit more of an interesting system as to where you do have that share. We've got a couple of options here. Now, when you're a shareholder, you could say that that person could buy and sell those shares. So then that person would be assigned to no ownership of the country whatsoever. And let's say, as I'm a free market guy, let's say you can buy and sell your own shares. I'm not going to probably pursue that one too much, but it probably could be a little bit problematic for very poor people thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to sell my share today and I'm going to be very rich in the moment, and then realize that it would have been probably a lot better idea just to still own Country PLC for a long period of time, because it would have improved. So I'm just going to put this down for a second. I'll be back in a set point. Okay, I'm back again. Sorry about that. I thought I was going to get pulled over, but it was all right. Okay, so we have a situation of people that could be awarded with a share on birth. Potentially, that does create certain problems in terms of people trying to birth into more shares. So you'd be there, okay, well, I'm going to have a family that owns plenty of this country, so I'm just going to have as many kids as possible that I can get, and then I will be, everybody would just have to sit back and enjoy the fat of the land. So yeah, that wouldn't be, that's probably a little bit of a problem area, but we may find different means and ways to counteract that problem. Maybe there. Obviously, we could say that the business PLC might have certain things in place, certain regulations which would counteract that. So. Just that's a theory on itself anyway, but you could have loads of families having 8 children just because that family could come rich off having more of an ownership of the Country PLC. Okay, so that part is explored. So that the shareholders are the people. Now, another thing that would be kind of interesting is that we would have a government of some kind. Now, this government would be a little bit more interesting because it would have to, in some way, balance the budget, or at least prove that it is growing in terms of expanding its productivity. And when I say productivity, not just creating loads of fictitious wealth or just like movements of the market into asset bubbles and things like that, but actually creating factory production lines and improving businesses and laying down high-speed broadband and all those number of little factors which can be thrown into the mix. So imagine that for a second, and that country would have, the Country PLC would have to have some kind of person that would be able to be that last point of decision maker on the choices of, and obviously now the different thing here is that the government would be driven by more so profit, so making the country very valuable or high wealthed. So it would have to create a lot of valuable products to the world. So that's an interesting perspective as well. There would be an interesting perspective as to the fact of that country being a net exporter than importer, because of it trying to reach a certain level of profitability. Now, this is an interesting perspective as well. Now, would this Country PLC or Business PLC be a country that just purely is making a margin on the export product of the country, or would it be trying to take a tax out of the system? Now, a normal business would understand that really you shouldn't be taking more so and more so out of your shareholders or even your staff as well. To really increase the production, you need to release and open up a free market. Obviously, if like you look at the Apple Store, when they create the application store for the iPhone, they open the doors to the free market, and all these great designers could produce all these fantastic things for them, which Apple has not really got the potential to do all of that in one foul swoop. So it really needs to be this entity which can like water and seed and flourish this free market business activity. So that's a very interesting perspective as well. So you have this government that has these mandates. Another thing as well is that where you would have very popular politicians coming into power and making promises and all that jazz, really, we would be looking at CEOs around the world or country CEOs around the world and looking to pay high premiums for these very good systemizing people who will be able to really put forward a good idea for the country. Now, imagine if you had Elon Musk as the country owner, or I guess you can say like the Donald Trump or the Steve Jobs in charge of the country. Imagine if he was really pushing and pursuing this ultimate goal of really generating as much wealth and value for the country as possible. And it really didn't matter too much of how popular they were, but as how well they could perform on the accounting ledgers. That would be certainly a very interesting perspective. And then obviously you just don't have all this weird proportional representation of favors for favors and people like going over land for this piece of land and all this kind of jazz. You would actually have this corporation making very quick and snap decisions in pursuit of the ultimate goal of getting the profit motive working as quickly as possible. Now, the interesting perspective of that is that you could say, okay, well, if you start doing that, then you're just really you're not looking after the people, and all you're doing is just chasing after the coins, and you're not being moral, and you're not using all those perspectives. But let's just take one step back again and say, well, these shareholders, obviously they have a share price in the value of that country, and maybe the international markets can buy those shares off of them. But also they get paid dividends, which is a margin of the profit every year, back to the citizens, which would be incredible. And not only do the citizens own the dividends, which would also be like a signal to how well that country is doing, but also they could potentially live or negate some of their lifestyles based upon that. And that return of value or return of wealth could be the choices that they make in pursuing healthcare, looking after themselves. Maybe if they're looking for jobs, they need to use that money for the meantime. So we do sort of see a little bit more of a fair proportional representation that could be occurring. And say if you wanted to, and this is where I say about owning other shares of other countries, you want to move to another country, you can purchase somebody else's share. So that gives you some fantastic options as to where you would like to move to. You can own that share, and obviously you can just work with the profit of that share ownership, and that share can go up and down in value as according to that country's PLC's performance. So there is some very fascinating areas of this. Now, I haven't explored too much the idea of if you sell your share, but let's say you do. You probably wouldn't be recommended to sell your share too much, or if you did sell your share, there would have to be a lot of work around it, or there's going to be a lot of speaking to you before you sell off your share. But say if you do sell off your share, or maybe if you could have an example where a country issues more shares, so people do have the option to sell off more shares of itself anyway, then you could have just less shares than other people, so there might be a sort of options in those kind of senses. But let's say you've sold all your shares, you would still be in a country which would be promoting free market capitalism. That country PLC would still be guiding you to creating businesses or new business growth, which has got like an international affair, and they will be trying their utmost to making sure that your business is as profitable as possible, that there wouldn't be sort of little loopholes where you could just make loads of tax-free gains, but you were just trying to make as good quality products as possible, which have got a good feasibility to be products in the outside world. There's still a real idea that you could be providing a good margin. Now, maybe this is the problem, and this is maybe the area where the country PLC would have to be making its money, is taxation of either export or imports, because they're a business running off of, I guess, profitability. I guess importing probably would be a kind of interesting thing to do, but they still want free market trading and everything else, so there'll probably just be an equal margin of export and import tax for the basically the business activity, or the safe and equal business activity that the country PLC is providing for its citizens. So that would be kind of interesting. Imagine if all the earnings that you earned were yours, but just where it comes to purchasing and selling things which became more expensive, maybe, well, I guess maybe they might want to do it on a business level and still increase business level profitability and margin activity. I just obviously have just walked into a little bit of a little problem there, because where I was explaining about the export and importing, we do have an issue in terms of that business does want to push upon as much business activity as possible, really GDP. So therefore, it probably wouldn't be as promoting of taxing those areas of its business, and maybe more so taxing in terms of employers' tax. So there we go. By the corporations have pretty much got the way that they want it in the first place. Less tax on import and export goods, and more so tax on the employees. But I guess that does in some ways flourish and encourage business activity. People who want to set up their own businesses usually are blessed with low taxation systems. So let's just say that that model is okay for the meantime, and it's kind of similar to what we have in the Western world anyway. Now, there's another issue that I sort of come to as well, is this consumerism aspect of the country being run like a business. Now, if the country is a business and its main goal is a profit motive, just throw out the window the idea of just consumerism for a second, and let's just put into the fact of value generation for the meantime. If that business was guided to creating value in the world, so maybe it was creating database software or things that were incredible labor-saving devices like robotics and high technology and things like that, well, that sort of stuff can improve the environment, improve quality of life, give us more free time to do our own things, and is not like this big plastic junk shop of loads of crap that we just want to export out to the world, sort of like, you know, your China factories and stuff like that. So we could potentially still get ourselves to a state where the country PLC is more guided towards really long-term, refined ideas of how to improve the wealth of its nation. Now, the other interesting perspective of business PLC is that this is a corporation, and it sort of goes down by the same route of the political system as well. So I have been sort of more of a proponent of ownership. It's not like I'm saying that this is the correct way that we should run our countries like a business, but it's just an idea that I just want to put around, because there may be little things that you can grab which can be applied into the world that we live in right now. But the one interesting aspect of this is that there's no actual ownership. So the CEO can come in and he can try his utmost, and this is maybe the problem of country PLC, is that he will try and reduce costs, reduce the expenses, whatever is occurring. So maybe he just tries to reduce government, which is kind of good, and then at the same time he has to earn a fairly decent taxation on the export and import. Now, I think that's probably a little bit better than what we have in the system today, but the problem is that sometimes you may have very short-termist viewed CEOs. They're thinking, okay, I've got my career to look after, so I'm just going to make these massive cuts, and it's going to look very good on paper right now. But once I've done well, I look really like some fantastic CEO, then the job market is going to open to me for another bigger country. So now that I've sorted out Sudan, I can upgrade myself up to South Africa, and then you've got CEOs which are moving from place to place, and they're looking at short-term goals. So one of the actual issues with the shareholders and everything else is that you're going to get these floating CEOs or these managers. They're going to come in, they're going to make some cuts, obviously, but the cuts probably is going to be kind of nice because it is the fat of the government itself, which is kind of interesting. And the area that they want to get as much as possible from is profit and margin from how many businesses that they can create and foster inside the domain of the country itself. So that is kind of good how the motives of a businessman would be based upon profit rather than popularity. You can see how where I know that obviously we can say, okay, well, what about this? What about that? What about all those kind of things? Let's just say that you could have some dangerous moments. You could have like that. Sometimes the country is not producing enough profit, and there is problems in terms of if you're not having your dividends, people are not having welfare or being looked after and things like that. So you could have some fairly dangerous moments. So, or you could have the country running into a debt, or maybe that CEO is piling on a load of debt onto the country. So you do have all of these little options of problematic situations which are occurring, where there is certainly centralized authority which has got a very short-termist view. Not to say that obviously a politician has got like an 8-year view, which is they can do pretty much what they like within that term of 8 years, and then they've got to, then they're out of there, and then they can just wonder what how that all went and stuff. So a politician may have a little bit more of a longer perspective than a CEO, but it's still one of those problematic things. The interesting thing is, unless obviously the country is in charge of the legal system as to how the commerce is traded and everything else. You could have that the country is organized in such a way that people or decisions are held accountable to those people. So obviously if the country is run like a business, but also that business is subjecting certain laws to the actual owners, So if you have made a choice which is immoral or negligent, you are going to be held accountable for that act, and it's not necessarily going to be down to the shareholder. I guess that can be litigated, and the shareholders could cast a vote for that to happen, but it's interesting how, in terms of the way that accounting and responsibility would occur in terms of government PLC. The other interesting aspect I've just popped into my head now is that where we have foreign ownership. Now, it's not to say that a foreign citizen can purchase land to say America or anything else like that. The market is open to foreign investors, but you do have a certain element if that a foreign investor is owning shares of a country abroad. There is potential for conflict of interest, particularly if that country is in competition with another country and they produce a lot of the same products. There could be some kind of there is obviously these little things which happen in the markets where people can buy out the other company, and all of those aspects in terms of how much share offerings can go out and PLCs. So you do have these little wranglings of how that could work out. Also, you could have that 51% share owner of that country. That would be kind of concerning as well, because they would be the full owner of that country and they get to choose exactly how to tax the citizens, and that could be kind of harmful. However, even if you are a 51% owner of a country, you still want to have growth, you still want to have profitability. But there is obviously a lot of issues in terms of how currencies could be, your country could be manipulated in terms of how the business wanted to be run. So here we go with another proposition, is if you do set up a country like the situation with Bitcoin. So there is only a certain allotted amount of Bitcoins that are released out to the market. Imagine if there was ownership or subscriptions to the country in terms of a Bitcoin network. And within the network or the blockchain of that, there is certain hard-coded, no changeable sort of things like the amendments of America, where none of these CEOs can be like 51% owners. You can't allow that to happen. There is rule books and laws which are guided within the blockchain technology itself. So that could be a very, very interesting perspective on how adaptable a country could be in terms of being a profitable unit. Now, obviously, when I mention a country, lots of countries have got a couple of cities, and they're probably the major profit centers, and then they've got a few resource areas and stuff like that. But obviously, a dominion of where a country lies is just basically like the borders of where the tax can be taken from. But you could have these blockchain technologies which would allot a certain area or unit of space, which is under the laws of that blockchain, and that is the existence of that blockchain, and that blockchain is in motion. So obviously, you can have a very democratic blockchain system where people can choose to change over the system, and obviously, I think Bitcoin has that system in place. If the majority does decide to make a change or an amendment in the future, they can do it with a certain amount of agreement. So yeah, you could have these situations where blockchain PLC countries could be installed as potential replacements for the traditional politician, government, corporation system to be put in place. You do have a number of little issues, as I said and mentioned before, in terms of the corporation still and the short-termist views of how the PLC would work, how people potentially could sell off all their ownership and they could leave themselves in the lurch quite rapidly. But I guess in some ways people do need to have that measure of failure. People need to see that you can fuck up pretty badly. And as a warning to everybody else, you shouldn't be doing these things. You should be getting health insurance. You should be looking after oneself. You should be trying to encourage your children to pursue work and effort so that they can provide value, so that they can provide themselves a certain sustenance of life, and that they can provide for their children if they choose to do so in the future themselves. This is all just natural stuff. It's not really like anything like that's really being dictated upon people. It's just one of the things of life that everybody has been handed down with, is that you have to nurture, look after your children, make them responsible for their actions, so that if they do decide to eat off all the food and drink all the water, then there's none for everybody else the next day. They're in a whole world of shit. It's all about that instant gratification thing, and if you can make certain avoidances for that, then you do improve the quality of life for everybody, and people do have a different perspective of the world to be a lot more sustainable and less so about, the government's going to pick up the pieces, the government's going to help us out, the government's going to do this and all that kind of stuff. I guess this is in motion, like the blockchain and the government PLC and the GovCoin I have mentioned before, but obviously I mentioned the GovCoin as a centralized source authority where there's the politicians and the corporations and the so-called voting system which is in place. That's not quite the point I'm getting to. The point I'm getting to is, I guess it wouldn't necessarily be a whole country. I guess you could have a whole country, but I guess it wouldn't make too much sense for a massive country which has got so many different areas to be run in different ways. You really ideally would like cities or central areas to be connected to an ownership point of the blockchain, and within that blockchain there is shared ownership of the coins or whatever the dominion of, or the denomination of ownership would be, and that has the element of proportional representation. People do have the method of voting for certain ideas and casting votes. There potentially still can be the option of less of a centralized authority, and if you do have ownership or rights ownership to oneself, if you start to own, people can own certain areas. So not only do you have the rule of governance of the citizens within the government PLC blockchain, now we do have to explore certain moral aspects of this as well. Now, a child which is born into the world and they live in this world where they're allotted a share, and this is the system that is put in place and everything else, well, they never chose any of this crap. So it's kind of an interesting perspective. However, we could have a situation where, this is another thing as well to consider, is that this shared ownership PLC thing as well could be just not awarded to you when you're born. So it's not a birthright as well. And maybe I'm thinking on a moral aspect, maybe it's probably better not to have a birthright as a share. So that means that you are born into an environment where you have to make your own choices. And maybe your parents do own the share of the city, PLC, whatever is happening in that terms. Now, I guess that does mean that you are a free citizen, so you can choose to move and create wealth wherever you would like to be in terms of what dominion of blockchain governance that you are in. And as there is ownership allotted to certain people, people own certain resources, and that is connected or prescribed to the blockchain itself as well. That gives us interesting perspectives of all, like there's almost like multi dimensions of ownership. So there is the ruling governance that potentially may own things like adjudication of trading. Maybe if there is any violence, they may use their certain private security companies. So you do have certain areas in which all of these entities can interconnect and combine. And obviously you do have ownership as well. Now, let's look at power and authority, because this is one of the areas which can be a little bit encroached. Now, there's two little elements with power and ownership. Firstly, people say if a government did, like a traditional government did, crumble, and people decided to just purchase up all the land areas or airspace or sea space, whatever needed to be purchased, everyone started to purchase their own areas. That would give them the rights of doing what they chose to that part of the land or whatever, or the business. Now we go in to explore another point, which sorry, I don't know what's happened to my voice. Frog in my throat. We have another area where people want to launch a government or governance by the city or whatever else in combined, and people have the option to purchase into that governance. Now, that's kind of interesting, but then you would need to have a certain level or a balance in terms of the respect of the ownership of the blockchain which is in place already, which is who owns what part of which land. So I'm saying that like a square meter of land is allotted on a blockchain, and that property right is prescribed correctly. But then also there would, if you are trying to create a city which has some kind of maybe some taxation system, or maybe not a taxation system, but some kind of cost profit motive which is being generated by the city, maybe it's just a service purely, so that government is purely a service. But then also you could spin it around and say, and this is all these ideas are just combined, but if you really want centralized authority or centralized like a network which is working together to drive forward ideas, people can purchase into a shared corporation, or sorry, not corporation, but co-op, where people can guide to say, okay, well, if we all combine the nets of the products that we produce and people are working together, then we can mitigate any losses and promote any good parts as well. But then I would say that probably if, and then people could be share owners and objects like that, but then maybe once you do create an entity like that, then the governance would say, okay, well, I would like very profitable people instead of less profitable people. That's just very strange little ideas which are coming into my head right now, because this is like this kind of scenario and these role plays which are going on. This is all just technology and everything else which is just coming into the equation right now. And I guess there's some people that are thinking about this stuff, but this is just a few steps ahead in the future, where people are just trying to work out systems and schemes without a centralized source of authority, but yet still trying to get some of the things which could occur in terms of like a business run operation of governance. Now, I guess people could own land, and the business PLC, which is a conglomerate of a number of business owners and everything else, could work in tandem with each other. And this is kind of interesting, and I guess all of these areas could overlap. So the idea of this one centralized city or everything else may not even exist. It may just be a number of governance factors which are coming through at the same time, while at the same time you do have a very important logbook of who owns what pieces of land and business and airspace and and yada yada. So it's it's fascinating in terms of how the city could operate and really work intertwined with each other, and you've got like this sort of a virtual network which is controlling, or not controlling, but is working in unison with the structure of the city itself. I guess you get some point as well where I've mentioned this before, where you don't have this. You might have CEOs, but you might have like a number of CEOs all trying to say, this is the way we can do this. This is the best idea for my collection of businesses over your collection of businesses. So there would have to be some kind of unification, or some kind of independent body which merges them together to make some final decision making, or the shareholders come together of all the corporations and then they all assign a certain vote to agree to certain things. That would be interesting. However, I guess the blockchain or the agreementship of the original corporation would go against anything of violence to the citizens or taxations to the citizens. So you might have that already encoded into how the scheme works, so that people cannot manipulate or change over things and start to exploit the citizens. So like get themselves into ridiculous levels of debt and put people into a load of hardship before they've even started in life. So yeah, there is some very fascinating perspectives in terms of how I think the ownership area is kind of fairly easy to do, as long as you can work quite closely with the government as to who owns what. So get all the registers of land transferred over to a blockchain which is watertight and doesn't have the ability to be played around with. Then once everybody can agree that that is the method of ownership which should be in place, like everybody can agree that Bitcoin should be the main currency in place, then you can have some very fascinating things which can start to emerge with the ownership of things. And I guess would be this blockchain government. And when I say blockchain government, it's not necessarily like a centralized force of power, but maybe some hard-coded anti-force, anti-power structures which are connected into that to prevent anything going too haywire, or some CEO coding in that he should be the superstar ruler of the city and he try and take over the other cities by force. So if there is that prior code, maybe there could be the code that everybody is allowed to self-defend themselves. So as a corporation or as a blockchain technology, if there is any act of violence or attack from, let's just say, one city to another, then there is the right of defense, and maybe there could be some co-op of defense, so that if any other city or any other city which is attacked by another city, or any other gang, it can happen on multi-levels, then there is the act of this governance PLC blockchain technology which can kick in and start funding security forces which can protect the populace, or people or individuals who have ownership of land. And yeah, I guess if the case may be that somebody has got a gun and they've walked over to somebody and say, this is my land now, piss off, and that person just goes away and goes, oh my god, hopefully the blockchain sort of recognizes this still, then they can go to the blockchain, they can go to maybe the governance of how their business is interconnected to, or the insurance company I've mentioned plenty of times before as well. The insurance company could be quite interconnected to the governance as well. We've never really seen that blurred effect of government and insurance working in unison too much. But that could just kick in straight away, and then that person with a gun is just sort of told by security sources, look, we're going to have to enforce this person's property rights. They have got the correct subscription. You can, please can you remove yourself from this land? And yada, yada, yada. There is obviously charity for that person to go to, but we obviously would have to work out what exactly is going on with that person before we think about all the circumstances as to why that person's got a gun and trying to push somebody else off a piece of land. So yeah, we do have interesting options as to what can happen and occur after blockchain subscription of ownership could happen. How we decide to mix, and I guess like pooling is a very interesting and fascinating thing in its own terms. As you could see with the blockchain technology, everybody decided to, because it took too long to crack. So every time, let me just go from the top again. So the Bitcoin network awards a block which is 25 Bitcoins if you can crack a password. So they use this sort of graphics card ICLS thing, and they rapidly run over a number of passwords or combinations so that it can crack this massive long, like, million unit password, so that it can be awarded with a block which is 25 Bitcoins. But it was quickly understood that sometimes if you've just got a traditional PC or like still a fairly decent PC, it could take a ridiculous length of time before you get awarded with one batch of 25 Bitcoins. Therefore, it'd be better to pool yourself together with other operative pools so that you can share the wealth in accordance with each other. So it's an interesting perspective in terms of how shared wealth or shared subscription can occur in a fairly free market sense. And if people decide to, who run businesses and things like that, they say, okay, well, I think we should just join arms. You may be a very good service industry company, and I'm a good food goods company. We need to merge together so that we've got both sides of the coin, and if anything happens, then we are fairly pooled, and one side of the profit can look after the other side of the profit. So, yeah, we do have fairly interesting pointers that we can get to in the vacuum of having no government. This pooling is very interesting as well. I just want to explore that one a little bit further. So I guess when we say pooling as well, pooling can be this option or this view to say that there is some kind of power grab. There is this power thing which is occurring where they're trying to get 51%. Once they get 51% of the ownership, then they can conquer and rule and choose what they want to do over the people and things like that. But in a demographic way or demographic manner, if you all join the pool and you try and join up to that point, then that could be that's a great thing, a great pleasant thing that can happen in this world. Yeah, maybe I need to explore a little bit in terms of the way in which 51% can, when the pool of 51% can sort of conquer the rest, and maybe this is all happening with Bitcoin technology, but I guess this is again could happen in terms of governance and ownership of land, and that they're exploring this one as well, and it's a big story in terms of what's happening in the world. So if you do have this situation where somebody can own, or this pool can come into place and own 51%, that you do have an issue of power, and people can power grab, and that pool could potentially own the government or the state or the security forces, and maybe try to change the laws so that they own 51%. So we need to go back to the proof of concept and ensure that the 51% situation cannot occur, and there could not be a power overtake in terms of a majority ruling pooled party. So that's another concept, and it's a very important thing whenever a government GovCoin or some kind of scenario in which a free market application is happening to the people in terms of the way that they're governed. So yeah, we do have these interesting concepts, these things. 51% ownership is a little bit of a fear, is a bit of a danger. It's obviously one of those things in terms of where you look even onto a biological level, you do have this scenario where 51% can take over the majority and be the majority owner. So in biology, we do need to find a method or a way in which we can reproduce and keep a sustainable level of work without having some kind of dangerous scenario happening. Now, obviously, where we take it back to a biological level, you can have some kind of communist scenario where you can have a queen which has the majority rule and can reproduce different things that can do different operative arms. But then you can have individualism and you can have sex on sex species like us, so that we can create other individuals and really pursue the best of individualism and not get this majority ruling factor which is kicking in and can create massive disruptions, and potentially it just sort of bites our own head off in the end, because then you have a totalitarianism which comes into place. As always with all these things, when we have a power vacuum or a power struggle or all these things, there's some incredibly dangerous situations which are occurring if you do have a government which is on its knees, or it cannot afford to do anything further, and it cannot actually keep a level of balance in play. You do have people that are libertarians, free market thinkers, people that are choosing to live in a world which is peaceful. But then also you do have the power people, the people that choose to create a mafia-run situation where taxes are demanded. So, as always, whenever I mention all these points and theories, if we do get ourselves into a state where the government does go to its knees, these ideas sort of need to be put out onto the internet so that people have thought over these ideas and have got plans and options, and they've got applications and businesses which can kick into force, not force, but kick in and counteract and really question as to the requirement of this singular centralized power authority, and give us more of a free market option in terms of how we can produce value in our worlds. So yeah, I think I've gone over a few fairly interesting-ish scenarios, probably in a very convoluted way, but in terms of your perspective, I'd love you to just sort of come back to me with any other ideas in terms of this business, government, PLC, interconnecting with the ideas of blockchain technology and ownership technology and what's the word where you assignment to certain objects. So if all of that, and obviously like the proof of concept in terms of the government coin, I guess I guess everything sort of semi runs on the coin as well, but it could be the government tax technology, which is a blockchain tax system. You never it doesn't necessarily have to be based upon the value mechanism, but it could be a cost mechanism as well, which people assign themselves to, and it could be like, I don't know, an option for everybody to get involved in. So there is all these little options which are available to us, and it really is like it is an absolute explosion of the brain in terms of what is possible now that there is definite technology which is protected by cryptography. The cryptography has sort of saved humanity in a lot of beautiful ways, because we do not have the ability to play around with it and have manipulation and have 51% forces going into power and all of this dangerous stuff. We do have something which could be agreed and hard-coded and widely adopted because of its merits, and less so because of the use of force. So these are potentially very beautiful times, but we would really like there to be people on guard when power vacuums do occur, not to jump to conclusions, not to not to just think in the moment, but to take calm, take thoughts, really think about things and how the world works and runs. If you think of the founding fathers in America, they were all using all the philosophy bases to provide this sort of this book, but the book didn't really sort of come into power. But now that book can be protected by cryptography, which is really untainable, and people can walk into this beautiful thing, or this ledger, or this blockchain book, which is protected by cryptography, and there is no way that they can manipulate it and create amendments and things like that. So it is fairly interesting how the world can be changed for a massive, massive better, and all for very good, fantastic moral reasons. So, yeah, thank you very much for your time as always. I do love to hear any thoughts and suggestions. As crazy as they may be, there may be some other little derivative ideas that we can run off of or shoot off of. So please send them through, and let's create a better world. So thank you very, very much for your time, and I will be back I'll be back for more podcasts and to really get the ideas going. Thank you again, and goodbye.